Hello, Andrew here. Welcome to Lecture 9 in the Using Creative Multimedia for Youth Engagement module. This lecture, our second last one, will be on critical analysis of digital content in youth work. So what we really want to look at here, we've covered, the use of multimedia applications from text, images, sound, video, and gaming, and the likes in other lectures here. So what I really want to do here is just step into this concept of a digital youth worker and to figure out what is required to do that, and just expand on a few elements of that really as we go, just to see how this can all come about really, or a different sort of frame to a different critically analytical frame to have on as a youth worker when engaging with young people. So we have this document which has been issued only this month in February of 2018, after 2 years' work looking to develop digital youth work, really. And it's a Europe-wide, I think there's 21 countries involved in it in the end, citing best practice and the different sort of experiences of youth workers and digital media in youth work in particular in all those member countries. And what has emerged is a really interesting document and a really useful toolkit. And it touches on pretty much everything you'd want to do. I haven't read it barring the lean towards gaming per se, and different elements of that. It's kind of covered and stepped into a lot of different media disciplines, but all kind of coming back to a core base of the operative word here being youth work rather than digital. Just to kind of iron that out, I suppose. First off, in that policy document, all these slides are literally where I'm just going to extract from that document really, because it is pretty comprehensive, and just talk about different ends of it as we go. The first one obviously would be arriving at a definition for digital youth work and what that might be. And at the end of the 2-year piece that delivered the policy, this is the definition on offer from that level. Digital youth work means proactively using or addressing digital media and technology in youth work. Digital youth work is not a youth work method. Digital youth work can be included in any youth work setting: open youth work, youth information and counselling, youth clubs, detached youth work, etc. Digital youth work has the same goals as youth work in general, and using digital media and technology in youth work should always support these goals. Digital youth work can happen in face-to-face situations as well as in online environments, or in a mixture of these two. Digital media and technology can be either a tool, an activity, or a content in youth work. Digital youth work is underpinned by the same ethics, values, and principles as youth work. Youth workers in this context refer to both paid and volunteer youth workers. Okay, so that's a pretty, wordy, but, extensive definition of what digital youth work might cover and who it might relate to. I've just highlighted that section there in pink of digital youth work has the same goals as youth work in general, and using digital media and technology in youth work should always support these goals. And that kind of, we've discussed elements of this before where, just kind of in terms of getting in a frame of mind of how to think and how to approach digital youth work, to think of it as an extension as traditional youth work rather than, a myriad of new skill sets and a totally different kind of profession. It's simply not the case. And likewise, further, obviously, digital media and technology can be a tool, an activity, or a content in youth work. I'll talk about that later, but sorry, was the next one I wanted to. Digital youth work is underpinned by the same ethics, values, and principles as youth work. So again, we have a strong, solid base from which to build a digital youth work model and a definition of it. What I really want to do is start just extracting that back to where it would fit, or how it does fit with traditional youth centre or youth organisations and youth workers in terms of how they go about doing activities and the likes. So just all we're looking at here is just there's an impact from technology and different sorts of different technologies impacting on society in general, but we're just for youth work in particular, And 3 dimensions of that are just the overall digitalization of society, organization, digital development, and the competences of youth work. So they're the 3 kind of broad strokes of why this is significant and why it is required. The youth work competences mostly in relation to young people and how they conduct their lives and what they're doing, and the digitalization of society is even extending, as we've talked elsewhere, into the Internet of Things, say, and just a whole sort of wired, connected world where people have we are immersed within that. In the case of understanding that ourselves, and then assisting young people to kind of understand that, and navigate themselves through that from a youth work perspective, is all we're really interested in. So one sort of component that's pulled out of that policy document is this concept of like an agile mindset being crucial for youth workers to perform their work in our dynamic society. So rather than, as I said, like learning a whole new it being a new profession or a whole new way of doing it, it's literally a reapplication of what youth workers have consistently done all the time. In terms of an agile mindset, the characteristics of that, I'll just list off some of them that I just pulled off this, agileconnection.com website. A positive attitude, thirst for knowledge, goal of team success, kind of a bit of corporate speak in there, but anyway, it's just, we got that. Pragmatism and a willingness to learn. So, there, in terms of like how youth work is conducted and how it should be, the best practice of it, they're all kind of component elements, pretty general sort of elements of what you'd expect and you'd like from youth workers in relation to working with young people. The goal of team success, possibly just with the organization, success is delivering, young people, resilient and young people who are ready and prepared for for early adulthood is what we're really looking at there. Pragmatism is kind of vital in regards to that, of just being able to look at needs assessments, or what type of care is required for young people, or where efforts need to be given. Positive attitude, absolutely. A thirst for knowledge, well, that's, if we put that, if we think of that in terms of being interested in young people and what they do and how they live their life, that's a kind of an interesting catch-all for that. And I suppose the most interesting one out of that list for me is this sort of willingness to fail. There is no failure, only feedback, and having to kind of think of that a bit different. So, again, failure is not really a word that we would associate with youth work, in terms of like a project mightn't work, or, need to be changed or tweaked or, trialed, but you don't really look at, anything you would do or work with young people as an outright failure. So, that language doesn't really exist already in youth work, in terms of we have this means of, you're just constantly adjusting things and tweaking things to kind of suit a particular young person or a particular group or a particular set of dynamics with that. And, even to kind of give to, if we look at it that way, then it's, youth workers would already have a lot of these sort of capacities already to do this type of work, So it's about taking everything as lessons, adjusting actions accordingly to feedback, and proceeding towards desired outcomes, resulting in continuous improvement. And again, that's like, an overarching sort of snapshot of what you would like and expect from every engagement you have with young people or a group of young people, in terms of projects or just them kind of understanding themselves and growing as individuals, and understanding interpersonal and interrelational stuff. And just kind of getting ready for early adulthood. At the same breath, we look at all that and we think of, that's no different really from what we would ask or like of young people, in terms of building resilience, and just, learning new skills, trying out new things, being positive in outlook. I mean, it's kind of the exact same thing of we're just looking to reapply to youth workers this agile mindset that we would already apply to young people, in terms of how we work with them. So there's just a breakdown here. The next couple of slides are just a relevant needs, right? So just going to list these off and again, just comment where it needs to be. So the digitalization of society, which we spoke about, to understand how digitalization is shaping the societies, including its impact on youth work and on young people. So that's for us to know, and courses like this or different sort of policy documents like the one we have, and all the toolkits and resources, which is in that URL link at the bottom. And I will attach it with the lecture. Just showing this sort of improved or best practice or variety or versions of, and that being something really, really interesting that should be looked at in terms of, a new set of digital toolkits, essentially, to be able to take young people's digital cultures into account in youth work practice. So, again, that's the kind of being interested in young people, where they are and what they are doing. So we can just kind of leave that there, really, if, taking that a lot into account. And meeting young people where they are really in terms of with their set of interests or the technologies that they're using, and that now being the domain of the youth worker to do, rather than this unnatural flow of bringing young people back to more traditional settings of youth work, I suppose. To be able to encourage young people to shape the process of digitalization themselves. So, that's the operative one, and really the vital one you want to get at, where you want to remove this sort of these concepts of mindless consumption of digital technologies and media, gaming, whatever, and really help young people to develop that sort of critical thinking model, to look beneath the surface of all these things and begin to be creative and reappropriate that for themselves, really, as they see fit, and to have the confidence and the wherewithal to start to do that. That's where you really want to get at, because it's just the most rewarding, enriching experience that you could really give to young people around this sort of barrage of digital technology that they're in, and the mediated messages that they're getting. In terms of relevant training for youth workers, planning, designing, and evaluating digital youth work. So we go through developing an agile mindset. This is it's literally a mental shift is all I really want to look at that as, or a readjusting of what youth workers are already doing. Know how to support existing youth work goals with digital media technology. So, this all fits into evidence-based practice, I suppose. Delivering artifacts and different sort of project-based work, maybe. And all that sort of stuff that can kind of create a real buzz and a dynamic around a certain technology or a certain form of expression, and can, be varied to include individuals or a whole number of people with that. So be able to plan digital youth work according to the needs and hopes of young people, their interests, preferences, aspirations, hobbies, styles, and online habits. Again, we would have covered a lot of this stuff elsewhere, but, it's nice to see it all in the one place like this. And broken down accordingly. That we see this sort of, the ideal thing of, young people, youth-led projects really is where you want to get at, and you just want to have the means to facilitate that, and the confidence and support as a youth worker to make that happen, really. Know how to involve young people in all stages: design, development, implementation, and evaluation of digital youth work, and recognize barriers to participation in these stages of digital work. So again, that's pretty much like the last one, where you want youth-led processes, really. But to recognize barriers to participation is an interesting one that we just want to kind of, as you grow templates and you grow different versions of you employing digital technologies into your youth work, looking at other best practice models from across Europe, as is, this publication is chock full of them, and just being able to pull on certain inspirations from elsewhere is a way to look at that. Be able to develop, implement, reflect, and redesign activities supported by, with, about digital media and tech. So that's, the further you get into this and the more familiar with the toolkits, whatever, being able to challenge yourself as a youth worker to kind of push yourself that bit further. And personally, for me, that's the most interesting one and the easiest one for young people to relate to, is to see someone else trying out something for the first time. Because otherwise they come along with this sort of perception that they have to be an expert before they begin, which is, I don't know where that comes from, but it's just maybe something to do with just everything being sort of instant, and, one part of it's confidence and the other part's being patient. And that not being in the air when it comes to how quick these technologies can deliver things to you where, there's an app for that, I suppose. Someone else has already done it and it's in an app form. So getting past that sort of way of doing it and getting under the bonnet and looking at how it's interesting. So, modding and just kind of, hacking, these sort of programs are really good ways to kind of get people in really quickly into something which is already pre-built per se, and then see how they can tweak it and look at it by looking at under the bonnet or how things can work with that. So be able to assess risks involved in digital youth work activities and mitigate them by applying appropriate measures. That's something we'll talk about in the next lecture in terms of, communications policies or different policies that you might want to have in place as a youth work organisation so you can do all this confidently, which is the most important thing. Be able to design individual and collaborative activities using digital media technology. Again, that's, we've kind of covered that elsewhere. Be aware of digital devices and applications available and to be able to choose them for youth work. Much like the kind of learning new things yourself and young people able to do that, it's again having that sort of openness and this being a sharing environment where people, there's a higher level conversation about tools and technologies and the finer details of them that can come off, which should be second nature when talking to young people. And again, a lot of young people would be very generous with that information because and you can learn a lot from them when it comes to this sort of stuff because they've been doing this already by themselves, Be aware of digital devices and applications available. We just did that. Be able to use assistive technology to support young people with disabilities to access youth work. Recognize barriers to participation that may be presented in the use of digital technology. Okay, so again, it's interesting stuff in terms of picking off particular projects or, doing that sort of needs assessment for particular young people you might be working in with in a group and, applying the right sort of technologies to that, so I'd even extend that as far as say gaming, being a really, really interesting sort of assistive technology or a tool to use to support youth work with young people, on autism spectrum. So that's just one example, that I think it's really useful, but it's a really helpful tool towards that end and just making sure that there's a wide variety of tools and different ways for a program or a session or a project to go within that. To be able to use digital technologies to increase social inclusion and participation in society. So that's probably the vital overall one where you want a more inclusive, richer society. That's all the benefit from this technology and young people critically thinking, applying themselves, learning new skills, growing in resilience and, being able to be confident in sharing and exchanging ideas and expressions of that type of work. So, information and data literacy. Be able to challenge young people to think critically about digital content and services. Again, we've kind of discussed that in good chunks within this module in particular. But the critical thinking model is the most giving model that you could have in terms of young people when it comes to a mass mediated society. Understand the digital literacy levels of each young person and to adjust digital youth work activities to it. So again, that the beauty of this is we're at the same time we talk about mass mediated or the technology being everywhere, the digitalization or the Internet of Things, and it being this ubiquitous thing which can look really heavy when it's on your shoulders. By the same extension, you have an enormous frame of reference of different points and aspects of that to pull on to discuss with young people. So, being aware of that and being included and, familiar with all those sorts of things, new innovations, how they kind of knock on terms of digital rights, human rights, where it fits in terms of, labor models, whatever way you'd want to look at it, and any end of it which is kind of significant and a seismic change for society, and most will be a change for young people as well. So that's kind of, it's important to keep those things in mind all the time and have it as an open, healthy discussion where, the literacy of that you can attain mostly through conversation and through shared words of a conversation. Everyone can become more literate around these things. Know what information can be stored from a legal perspective, protection of young people's privacy, personal data, etc. Again, we'll discuss that in developing a policy document in the next lecture. Communication. Know how young people communicate in digital environments and adjust digital youth work activities to that. So again, we've kind of talked about it again, but to speak with it again, and all you're really looking at there is the same as if it was young people in a room and how they behave interpersonally, or understanding boundaries, and just acceptable versions of that. You're basically you're just having to be versed about that in a digital world, and really challenging young people to be aware of that, and how they might conduct themselves in that situation, and mostly how they would have experienced other people, behaving towards them that they thought would have been, inappropriate or something, or and just where that can kind of marry. But the operative word here being that that's an open conversation that you can learn a lot from that, and build some sort of etiquette for how to conduct and interact with each other online in digital environments. Be able to help young people make informed choices about appropriate digital tools with which to interact, collaborate, and share with different target groups. So again, like I said, you've got a toolkit here, and now it's a case of, what I'd call the planning stage of a project, where you'd have young people sit down and talk about what they need to do and how they need to do it. When this is being youth-led practice. And given an estimation of how long that might take is, and just to be kind of patient and consistent with that is the only real issue from a youth worker's side that has to happen there. And then also just staying a little bit ahead in terms of supporting them with the certain tools that they're using. Or if it's a case of learning them for the first time, just fully embracing the excitement of that. Knowing that you're going to work on something together and everyone's going to learn from it. So it's more of an adventure that way, I suppose. Be able to help young people be aware of cultural and generational diversity in digital environments. So again, I think that this course would have covered a lot of that in terms of, mediated versions of things, and, representation in particular. And a lot of it's sort of based, generationally, we're looking at mostly with TV and cinema based for most of what I've talked about it in relation to, race, queer culture, and feminism per se, and development as well. So just to have that as as a full sort of toolkit of interesting things to discuss and points of discussion, and reframing discussions that go on, and really breaking down certain sort of assumptions, asking young people where they arrived at that assumption, how they think that might, have come about, and just getting under the bonnet again and really understanding, what their understanding and their sort of digital, their literacy around these sorts of issues, really. Be able to support young people become active citizens in digital society. So all that should really be contributing towards that. And in terms of just making, if it's showcasing work or having shared spaces for showing work, or and just conducting themselves in that sort of digital domain, really, to just make sure that that's all acceptable and understood, and is reinforced by both a youth organization, and any policy documents that are required for that. Know how to react to hate speech, cyberbullying, and other unwanted behavior online, and encourage young people to do so. So this is kind of a vital first one, which every youth worker, no matter how traditional, is aware of by now. These are real things that have a real sort of seismic effect on young people's lives. And sadly, there's any amount of, poor worst case scenarios of that already, and how bad that can be. And it does, on the face of it, it looks like a really, really harsh world for young people to kind of have to be operating in by themselves with that, and without the confidence to be encouraged to do so and speak out about certain things. Excuse me, in the absence of, any sort of official line on that, or even if the official line does come in, that it can be too top heavy and not really harmonious with how young people do mostly conduct themselves to this, because it's always this sort of like, the worst examples of it are, amplified the loudest. But that's not to say that doesn't need to be addressed, and people need to be aware of that. So hate speech, cyberbullying, any unwanted online behavior is a vital sort of thing for youth workers to be aware of and educated in, and then also to encourage young people to know more about that and to be active with what they know. So that's probably a perfect entry-level example of what needs to be done in terms of digital youth work in more traditional youth settings. Be able to reflect on the youth worker's own digital identity in a youth work setting. So again, we're just looking at reflective practice there, which again we would apply and as kind of best practice in terms of youth work. So it's not too massive an extension of that. And if, you know, this list was even a checklist and you're following it all, well then you'd certainly be delivering on that. Digital creativity. Be able to encourage young people to create and edit digital content and express themselves through digital means. So as we already discussed elsewhere, you know, you don't have to be the master of everything to introduce young people to these tools. If someone came in looking to draw a picture in a youth centre, you'd sit them down at a table with a chair, give them a pencil or a crayon and a piece of blank paper and sit there beside them and reassure them the roof wasn't going to fall in. You wouldn't be expected to draw a Caravaggio style likeness to a person or any object in order to inspire them to start. So I say that as like a really pointed example of you don't need to be the expert to begin on this, but that doesn't, and the vital one here is encouraging young people to create and edit digital content. So if it's a case of doing this alongside them and learning the benefits of your sort of encouragement model while you're learning or ascertaining the sort of expertise and the unique expertises, which they all have in their own way by now, and they've just done it in sort of pockets that it just hasn't come about yet. That is like the best entry to that really. But with a view to creating and editing their digital content is where you want to bring it. Be able to give young people opportunities to explore coding or get acquainted with maker culture. Again, so, you know, unless you're into that at the moment or you have that sort of agile mindset, that might look like a bit of a hurdle right now, but that's no reason why you shouldn't get introduced to that. I mean, in school environments and just in youth work in particular, STEM, you know, would be a component part of that, where it's easy to get coder dojos where you can get facilitators of these to come in and begin to do that for you, and then you can learn alongside young people if that is the case. It's not such a massive leap as it appears. Understand how copyright and licenses apply to data, information, and digital content. Again, that's something you can just kind of, you know, there's literature on that, and it's not too heavy really. And you could honestly, where we would have discussed elsewhere, like Creative Commons and places like that, and get a breakdown of how copyright and licenses work, fair use, fair dealing, this idea that you can, you know, the lectures and some of the materials I'm using this will go under like a fair use policy where I'm not profiting from it, but I'm using it and citing the location that I took it from. And I'm using only a section of it to kind of to apply to a different sort of aspect of that and referencing it in a certain sort of context. So they're all like elements in terms of copyright and licenses, how it works. One thing to kind of note that is actually a bigger issue in young people's heads than it might appear at first sight, where, you know, they're curious about why you couldn't use a particular type of music, or someone is going to sue you, just even on that basic line where, you know, you can't do that because you will get sued. And this being some sort of fear-based notion of like, you know, how all that would work, and there's someone who's outside your door about to kind of, you know, sue you, which is kind of, there's a preconception that needs to be broken down a lot. And I think understanding copyright and licenses, how it applies to different sort of things like digital content, is one way to get at that really, and to understand that and to really give them an understanding of the nuances of that. Be aware of the available tools for digital creativity, including free and open source tools. So we would have discussed some of those in the last module in terms of photo, video and audio editing packages. And again, there's a constantly, an open source version of tools that are being used that are quite costly. So, you know, in the community of practice here, we'll be just adding to that constantly. Safety. Okay, so we've discussed that a little bit elsewhere, but we'll talk about it here in terms of just this policy document. To be able to encourage young people to make informed decisions about how they want to portray themselves and engage online, who they want to share their content with, and how to control this by using privacy settings. Again, it's getting in under the bonnet, learning how an application works, but mostly from this sort of critical thinking model of, you know, young people being present and aware of how they want to conduct themselves and how they would expect other people to conduct themselves opposite them. And this being sort of vital first introductions to that. And to encourage young people to make those informed decisions is the vital thing. So all you can do is kind of provide the literature and the information, and really just kind of stress the importance about these decisions and how they might kind of impact on themselves or on other people. Be able to help young people to understand terms and conditions of digital services and ownership of their data. Another very interesting area which we kind of talked about elsewhere. But, there's kind of toolkits that can be given to young people just to show them how that all works and how it kind of puts together, like just what we would have spoken about in the last lecture there of just, when you sign up for a piece of freeware or a free service, how much of that is actually free, I suppose. Be able to help young people deal with problems they have encountered in digital settings, for example, cyberbullying, grooming, sexting, and exposure to content they find upsetting or shocking. So again, that's like a vital one, much the same as like conducting themselves online, and being prepared to kind of support young people with that and challenging that type of behavior or inappropriate behavior online. You wouldn't take any of it in a youth work setting in a building. So, if the young person is central to the youth work process, we need to extend it in there and make sure that they're kind of as safe as they can be, or as confident and assured that there are sort of supports to prevent this sort of stuff becoming as shocking, upsetting, and defining as it can be sadly for some young people. And to be able to refer young people to appropriate support services, which is another vital one, or, whatever way, if it's a case of making a complaint about that they know that there are steps that can be taken. It's not a hopeless situation. Be able to help young people minimize the environmental impact of digital technologies and their use. Okay, again, that's just kind of project-based stuff where you can look at, technology for good, really. And, there's a whole creative end of that of like how people would want to use it. Be able to establish appropriate professional boundaries in their online relationships with young people. So that's geared towards the youth work. Again, we'll talk about that in the devising a policy document later on. Okay, in reflection and evaluation, understand where the youth worker's own digital competence needs to be improved or updated. That's just in reflective practice, knowing what needs to be done or what direction needs to be pushed in. Once you agree with young people to where a project might go or a set of skills or tools that might be used, for you to kind of get on the front foot and begin to become familiar with them as well. And really, after a while, as we kind of showed, there's a certain sort of layout to applications, and after a while, it does break down into a certain sort of formula. And it's just what you want it to do being the issue, and that's just a case of asking the internet the right question of what you want to do. I heard someone's pointed out what a game programmer. She described coding being advanced Googling. And it's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, where there is this sort of, especially with code, where people have tried and worked and got a piece of code to work, and there's any number of means of sharing that. And it's a sharing culture with that, where people can borrow it and take it and just cite it like they would with a citation, if that was the case. But, just to kind of understand that things can be shared and used like that. So be able to use evaluative techniques to reflect on the effectiveness of undertaking digital youth work and improve practice. Okay, so that kind of feeds right in directly into reporting and illustrated sort of youth work and best practice of it. Know how to share experience and learn from other youth workers is the vital one. If this is kind of going to catch on as the relevant shift in mindset and in delivery of services that youth workers need to have in the digital age with young people. So someone has to take the lead with that, and that person is you. Okay, so that's that. Next, we're going to look at developing multimedia policies for youth organizations. Any questions, please feel free to drop me an email, and I'll come back to you on that. Okay, see you next lecture. Bye.